folks who are planning for or living in retirement are worried about the effect that inflation will have on their plans. And here to talk with me about that is Dana Anspaugh from Sensible Money. Dana, welcome.
Hi, Bob.
So inflation is still high as we record this session, and people are worried. What advice do you have for them?
Well, it is always worrisome when you go to fill up your car with gas and it costs more. Now, gas has come back down a little bit in the last few months, but on the other hand, eggs have gone up. I don't know about you, but sometimes I can't even find them at the grocery store right now. So, of course, that can cause you to feel a little stressed. You know, I tell this story sometimes. I had a client come in this year who was talking a lot about inflation and what should we do with his portfolio and how is this going to impact him. And in the way that we run projections, we offer people the ability to take a little bit more each year. We have inflation raises built in. And so I said to him, well, are you feeling like you're short on cash each month and we can increase the withdrawal, the deposit we send to you? Oh no, he says, I don't need any more money. And so it made me laugh. He was reading about it in the news, making him think that he needed to urgently do something, when in reality, the impact on his household was, something he wasn't really noticing. He wasn't short on cash. Now, I know that isn't the case for everybody, but that was one example of sometimes we hear things in the news and can get a sense of urgency, and maybe we don't need to do anything.
So as you say that, it strikes me that too, a lot of folks who are building in inflation adjustments for expenses have to deal with the fact that for many years we were in a zero interest rate environment. And so if we were adding inflation adjustments in a zero rate environment, maybe we sort of built in this cushion already, potentially.
Yeah. That is the case for many of our clients. We had assumed that they would need to spend a little bit more each year in retirement, and for almost a decade that wasn't the case. Now, we did have a build-up reserve that we could use to increase their withdrawals now that inflation has kicked in. So certainly that is the case. There's also a difference between the time frames you look at. Inflation is real, so I don't mean to minimize it or say that it's not going to have an impact. That's not true. It will, and it does. But when we zoom out and look at what inflation might be over 30 years, it's likely not going to be outside of around that 3% range that many people use in their financial planning projections. Now, if we look just at a very narrow time frame, a 5-year time frame, yes, it could be significantly higher, just as we had 10 years where it was significantly lower. And so when you're planning over the long term, it often means there's nothing you need to do urgently right now. Now, that being said, there are steps you can take to help protect your plan against inflation, and those are always smart things to do. There is a paper that came out in 2020, an NBER paper that studied the effect of COLAs, cost of living adjustments, in pensions. And what they showed was that, now again, nobody wants to hear this, but that if you eliminated a 3% cost of living adjustment on a pension plan, and some pension plans are looking for ways to make their benefits last longer, and so they may reduce the inflation component that they pay out to their retirees. Now, if they were to do that, you could make up the difference by working just 4.5 months longer. They also said if you eliminated a 5% inflation adjustment, you could make up the difference by working just 7 months longer. So, of course, one of the biggest things we can do to protect our future selves, our future retirement against the impact of inflation is to work longer. Even if it's just half a year, that could make a big difference. The other thing we can do is delay the start date of Social Security. Social Security benefits went up by over 8% last year. Now, if you're already retired, you saw that increase in your Social Security paycheck. It happened automatically. But many people who are not taking Social Security yet don't realize that that increase also impacted their future benefits. So even if you haven't started Social Security yet, when there is inflation, that inflation increase will impact your future benefits. And when you get your Social Security statement, it is not showing you the the benefit amount after future inflation adjustments. So when people are doing their own calculations, they often miscalculate. They don't realize that they will get more than what's on their statement because of these future inflation adjustments. So delaying Social Security to age 70 means you get more. And now each time there's an inflation increase, for example, last year at 8%, you got an 8% increase on a higher starting amount. So that was very beneficial for those people who had waited as long as possible to collect Social Security.
Yeah. Let me go back to delay working longer, and I think some of the benefits are worth noting. This notion of contributing even more to your retirement account, delaying withdrawals from your retirement account, giving yourself a little bit extra time for the money to grow in your retirement account. All those things seem like additional benefits that maybe sometimes get lost in the fray.
They do, they get lost in the fray, or sometimes people just don't want to wait any longer, right? That's the reality. When you've hit your end point and you just have to get out of your current position, sometimes, we can talk to you all day long about working longer, but you're like, no, I got to make this work.
Yeah.
And so, but always delaying the day at which you have to take withdrawals, or working an extra year, or even half a year, delaying Social Security, those things have a big impact.
Yeah. So it's also, I think, worth noting, too, that when we think about inflation and we think about expenses in retirement, some studies have suggested that retirement actually declines on a real basis in retirement. And so is that worth noting as well?
It is. And so, when you look at how retirees spend money, it can be broken into the go-go years, the slow-go years, the no-go years. And the go-go years, early retirement, people are often traveling, and, they might be remodeling the home. They might be catching up on hobbies and, things they haven't done for years. But when you get into the slow-go years, usually around early, certainly by mid-70s, spending slows down. People aren't shopping as much. They're not eating out as much. They're not traveling as much. And so spending does slow down. And so that can be factored into someone's retirement plan, where you build in that they may need additional spending in their first 5 to even 10 years of retirement, and then that will taper off later in retirement. So we see that in real life with clients we've had now for over 20 years. So we've watched them go through these phases, and I would say the majority of them, certainly the majority, over 60%, when we offer inflation raises each year, because that is built into our projections, they will say, no, I don't need any more. What you're sending me already is sufficient. Now, that's when they are in those slow go years in their 70s. Our early retirees in their 60s still, almost always when we say, we can increase your withdrawal by this amount per month, they'll say, okay, yeah, that would be really useful.
So it strikes me that my takeaway from all this is this notion of, it's one thing to sort of read in the newspaper or online that inflation is at 6 or 8 or whatever percent it might be, and to be frightened by that number. It's a whole nother to sit down and work with the numbers to see how inflation might affect your plan, and to find solutions for whatever might be concerning you, and create certainty out of what might be uncertain, an uncertain environment.
Yeah, they are very different things. For example, even looking at retirees, if you are renting, inflation is likely going to have a bigger impact on you, because rents are rising and have been rising rapidly. But if you have a mortgage, the principal and interest portion of that mortgage is fixed, or you may have paid off your mortgage. So even looking at a retiree with the exact same resources, one has a mortgage payment, the other one had the same amount of rent payment, well, inflation is going to impact that renter in a much bigger way than it's going to impact the person with the mortgage at a fixed rate. And so just reading the headline news, it doesn't necessarily tell you whether it's going to impact you. The other thing we see are a lot of, talk about portfolio strategies to account for inflation. Now, if you have accurately accounted for inflation in your spending plan for retirement, meaning, let's say you needed to withdraw, $70,000 a year, and each year you know that you would need to withdraw a little bit more, then most of that should already be built into your plan. But if your spending plan for retirement just said, well, I need $70,000 and somehow that has to keep up with inflation, then you might be trying to figure out, well, how do I make the portfolio do that? And so there are two different ways of approaching it. The way that we approach it, we look very long term, over 30 years in retirement. And so we want to build those inflation increases into what we assume needs to come out, and we've already baked that into the portfolio. But other people might have different goals. They're looking on a much shorter term basis. And so they might be saying, well, what could I do with the portfolio right now to try to hedge against inflation? And the challenge is there aren't any surefire things. Historically, people have discussed TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, but with this recent bout of inflation, TIPS actually went down in value. I-bonds are fabulous. They have a great inflation adjusted component, but you can't get a whole lot of money into them. And so it's hard for that to have a meaningful enough impact on your overall retirement plan. So there aren't any great solutions like magic investment solutions. I wish there were. It's back to the good old grassroots things of working longer, delaying Social Security, and understanding how it's actually impacting your household, not just what the headline news is saying.
All right, Dana, we covered a lot of ground. Anything we missed or anything that just bears reemphasizing?
I think that's about it.
All right, Dana. Thanks again for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. It's so greatly appreciated.
You're welcome.